Hi, everyone. Since it is the top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mokhtary, and I want to thank everybody for joining today's member webinar, Non-positional Leadership, How to Grow Your Leadership Skills Without a Leadership Title. Next. We put together just a slide of some housekeeping rules. If you've joined NSGC webinars before, these should all look familiar. So everybody will be muted upon attendance, but we really do want to hear from you today. So we'll have some opportunity for audience engagement. If you have any questions throughout the duration of the webinar, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A box. Or if you'd like to chat something out to all attendees, feel free to also put that in the chat box. We will definitely make sure to leave some time at the end of today's presentation to address those questions. Next slide. So today, the Leadership and Management SIG really wanted to put together a webinar that touched on a few different areas of leadership to hopefully aid all NSGC members wherever they are in their leadership journey. So you can see our objectives have a bit of a wide range. We'll talk a little bit about mentorship, determining your own strengths and communication style, and we'll definitely leave you with some resources and tips that hopefully you can start implementing today or in the next few days to grow your leadership ability. Next slide. So we have 4 speakers today. I am so delighted to be joined by Hufham, Carrie, Lahner, and Anna Essendrup. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves before our sections of the presentation today. So I'm happy to start and introduce myself. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Mokhtary. I'm currently a genetic counselor for Texas Oncology based in San Antonio in the hereditary cancer sphere. So given today's webinar is about leadership and developing leadership skills, we wanted to just share with the group today, when did we start feeling like a leader? And even when the 4 of us were chatting beforehand, it's a little bit of a difficult question to answer. It's not like you wake up and you're like, yes, today I feel like a leader. But when I was reflecting on this question, it was important for me to remember that leadership and management are not the same thing. So I myself have never held a formal management position, but have really had the ability to volunteer with various SIGs to lead open discussion forums. So I'm always so grateful for the lab industry SIG. When I worked in an industry role, they said, well, we have this group of GCs, they work, in sales roles. We work for all these different labs and competing labs, run with it. And so I said, okay, let's go ahead and start a discussion forum and see what happens. And they have been some of the most meaningful experiences that I've been a part of through that SIG. So that was definitely a moment where I had to quiet my imposter syndrome and remind myself that sometimes being a leader is just helping to, organize everybody and hopefully be a role model for open communication and vulnerability. So with that, next slide. Here are our conflicts of interest disclosures, if anyone is interested. Next slide. And Anna, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about our audience participation tool today.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So we will be utilizing a tool called Slido today. So you should see currently a QR code on your screen being shared through the webinar. You can use your phone to access that QR code here, which will take you to our specific engagement page. Or you can also go to slido.com and it will give you, it will prompt you to enter the event code. The event code today is LMSIG for the Leadership and Mentorship SIG.
Management
SIG. Okay, sorry. So that should be there available for you if you don't have a way to access QR. But either way, that should then allow you to participate in some of our audience participation polls and questions. So to get us started, just to try this out, we are going to ask you all to use Slido. It should have an active poll question now and be prompting you to enter an emoji to describe your ideal vacation. So I'll give you a few moments to try that out and submit those right now. Seeing some sun, some activity, some relaxing coming up. Some world travel in there. Awesome. Just wait a few more seconds in case anybody else wants to test it out. Otherwise, we will be using this tool throughout the presentation. So if you want to keep that browser or page open on your phone, as those poll questions come up, a new active poll will appear on your device or browser. So just keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna. So before we jump into our first section of our webinar today, we thought it would be really helpful just to hear from all of you who've joined. We have over 170 of you who joined, so thank you for spending an hour with us today. We really want to hear from you. So I had sent out a poll to all the NSGC members with some questions about leadership, and this was really the first one. What exactly makes a leader? When you think about a leader in your life, what are some of the adjectives that you would use to describe that person? So if we go to the next slide, Anna. So this is our first opportunity to get back on Slido and share with us. So, one word or maybe 2 words hyphenated typically works well for these types of word clouds. But yeah, go ahead and share with us. We'll give everyone just a minute or two, or a minute to share some words. Yeah, great. Definitely confidence, a big one, role model, a term that definitely comes up. Ooh, these are great ones. Really nice. And after the word cloud, I'll share with you what we got from some of our members as well, but definitely seeing a lot of those same words. Approachable, definitely. So why I think we all love, in the leadership management sake, I was talking with Julie about this, why we like these word clouds. If you look at all of these words that everybody is sharing with us today, nowhere in there do you really see, boss, or a leader is somebody with a specific title. I'm doing a quick scan, but I'm not really seeing any, has to have people reporting to them, or in these types of roles. We don't really see that when we think about leadership. So I love these words, but in the sake of time, let's go ahead to that next slide. These, you can see a lot of similar words as what we saw from all of you sharing today. We see these, a leader is somebody that typically is a great communicator, easy to talk to, somebody who inspires you or motivates you to, do a job better or to do things in a different way. So we are the leadership and management SIG, but as the topic of our webinar really highlights, that being a leader really is not linked to having a specific title or have achieved, a management position. And so that's why we really want to empower everybody today, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you can still be a leader. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. These were some quotes that I pulled out from the membership that I just thought were particularly really summarized a lot of the themes that were coming through. A leader is somebody who creates value and opportunity, no matter their role. This quote I think was really nice as well. The leaders I have most admired are the ones who seem to leave every person and project they touch a little better off than before. And this last quote is going to serve as a perfect transition to our first speaker, Julie. There's no one way to be a leader, and identifying your areas of strength and growth are essential to creating your own style. So when I saw this quote, I was like, I really couldn't have asked for a better way to transition over to Julie's presentation. Next slide. So with that, Julie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So very briefly, I am Julie Hufham, and I have been a genetic counselor for a little over 15 years. I've spent the majority of that 12 or so years in a lab or industry sort of field-based role. And like Sarah, I have never actually had a official management or leadership title in my career either. And as Sarah mentioned as well, I think, day to day on when you feel like a leader, I think sometimes it depends on who else you're in the room with. But I think for me, a really big moment for me was I spent about a decade at Myriad Genetics. I'm currently at Oncocyte Corporation, but about halfway through my career at Myriad, when I'd been there for about 4 or 5 years, I had more opportunities to step up and lead smaller projects and smaller teams, and really had an amazing mentor in my manager who helped me identify some of my leadership strengths and how best to use them. And really felt like some of that quote that Sarah just mentioned, that I was able to leave a mark and help get a project across the finish line, and was starting to have some of that recognized by others. And I think that for me, when others started referring to me as a leader, that was when it kind of sunk in to me, was, oh, well, maybe I am. So with that, next slide, Anna. So just to start off with some definitions, everyone has done a great job already of explaining that you don't need a title to be a leader, but what does non-positional leadership mean? And essentially it's ability to make a positive impact through leading by example. It's all around cultivating influence. Some people refer to it as leading with influence versus leading with authority. So it all comes about where the power comes from. Does it come from a place of position? Then that is leading because of your title, positional leadership. But if it's really about relationship and skill building and leading through influence, that's non-positional leadership. And again, it doesn't have to be huge sweeping changes or acts that you're making. As Sarah mentioned with the lab and industry SIG, the ability to step up and do what's necessary to contribute to a group's functioning and productivity. So next slide. So what are the keys to leading without authority? So it really kind of comes down to 2 main categories. Your self-awareness of knowing what your leadership style is, what your strengths are, what your communication style is, and that's really what we're going to focus on in this next section. But I did want to talk about leading with influence. And so it's really all about leading by example, being that role model. I saw that in the word cloud. And it's really about empowering and motivating others. It's all about lifting others around you. It's not about you trying to take the spotlight, but either your team or your project and helping them have the spotlight. And it's also about stretching yourself. You have to feel a little uncomfortable to grow, and taking ownership. So not just when things go right, but when things don't go right, and being able to own that and own up to that, and having that, again, some of the words I saw, that trust and respect, and people knowing that integrity that you have as a person. And it is a little bit of that go get 'em attitude, making things happen, taking the initiative, not just waiting for opportunities, but speaking up when you see something that you think you could help in, and having your voice heard. And of course, resources are very important. And Sarah is going to talk a bit about the resources that the lab or the leadership and management SIG does have to offer. So next. So let's start with that self-awareness, and who are you and how do you get to know yourself a little bit better. Next slide. So it can be very difficult to decide what kind of leader you are when there's a plethora of choices. So I thought it would be helpful to provide some framework by really going over a few established leadership styles. And again, it really runs the gamut. Some people say that there's 6, some of them say that there's 7, 10, 11, 15. People keep coming up with more and more styles. But again, this is really just a snapshot, really from some established leaders in this field of psychology and leadership and management, and some of the different things that they have published. So we'll start with the democratic. And so it's what it sounds like. It's like our democracy of our government. So the leader makes the decision. So they have the final decision, but they are basing that on the input of others. Some also refer to this as a consultative leadership style. And so again, each team member has the opportunity to contribute to the direction of a project, but that leader ultimately holds that final responsibility, that final decision. And this is one of the most popular and one of the most effective leadership styles. So again, very collaborative approach. Pros, it does encourage creativity, engagement from all involved. But the cons, I'm sure, as we're all aware of, if you're in a really fast-paced environment and decisions need to be made quickly, it can be very time-consuming to get every single person's thought on it. It could also be costly because time is money, and especially in certain industries. So it's not always the best for a super fast-paced environment. Now, the opposite of a democratic leadership style is an autocratic, also known as an authoritative leadership style. And this is single source, strong, centralized authority. Really, a lot of this can be seen through fear-based leadership. They may offer rewards, but a lot of times it's focused around penalties and very much communication from top down. It is not a bi-directional flow of information. It can be useful in certain situations, especially if decisions need to be made swiftly, but really a caveat is the leader in that situation needs to be very experienced and have the correct skill sets for that situation. The obvious cons are people feel unheard. There can be a high turnover rate. Employees are unengaged. So again, it's not typically one that is used often. Laissez-faire is another style, and it is very much what it sounds like. It is a very hands-off, passive approach to leadership. Essentially, someone gives the team, here's all the information you need, now go. And so that's it. Very little updates, very little check-ins or coordinating of the overall group. And for the right people, this can be super empowering, especially for creative team members, members who are very skilled and self-motivated. They can love that hands-off approach because they feel a lot of freedom and they feel a lot of autonomy. But the opposite is the con there is, especially for someone who isn't as confident, maybe is newer in their field, they can feel left behind. They can feel like they have very little guidance. And that lack of structure can lead to a lot of problems, and lack of communication can lead to a lot of problems where the team members are confused and there's a lot of inefficiency going on. Transformational leadership style is also known as a visionary leadership style. And this is typically, you can be a person who is visionary and creates a vision for a person without having a visionary leadership style. So the difference is that the style is really based around the goal of, as a visionary leader, you are trying to transform a business or a group by motivating them to go above and beyond. This is often seen where maybe one company has bought another company and they're shifting directions, or a lot of times this is seen in startup of, you've got to get people hitting the ground running, you've got to get them to believe in the company's mission, and really it is all about goals and tasks, and they continue to get more and more difficult as more and more things are done. So again, it can lead to very high productivity and engagement because you're consistently asking for more from people. And when there's a shared vision and a shared trust in what you're doing, that can lead to high employee engagement or high team member engagement. But the con is there's no individual coaching or guidance at all, and it can be very easy to get left behind. Next. So transactional is not used that often. It is really a direct form of leadership where, just like it sounds like, I've asked you to do a job, you do the job, and we're done. And you get paid for exactly the work that you have done. So really the leader's job in this sense is to establish what those tasks and roles and responsibilities are. The good thing is it does eliminate confusion. Tasks are very clearly spelled out, but obviously it curbs creativity, it curbs innovation, excuse me. And it can lead to lower job satisfaction and turnover. Typically, a transactional leadership style is really based on a more short-term needs and is really a give and take. So things, this is often seen in sales. Hey, if you meet your target, you get the bonus that you were promised. If you don't, there might be a penalty. So again, that's very much also seen in like construction, things like that. You do your job, you get paid. Bureaucratic is really a by the book kind of leadership style. So rules are set on how the work should be done, and bureaucratic leaders ensure that team members follow those procedures meticulously. And so it's really all around processes and regulation. There's no room for flexibility. So new ideas and new strategies are typically met with resistance. Typically there is a hierarchical structure with, again, top-down flow of power. We see these a lot in jobs that involve safety and risk or managing valuable items like gold and coins, and really this is how it's done because this is how it's done. Obviously the con there is there's really no motivation, there's no thinking outside of the box, no one really goes the extra mile. So this is certainly something that is not an appropriate style for an organization that is a growth organization or a startup. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is servant leadership, which also can sometimes be referred to as a coaching style. And so this is a leader who strives to serve the needs of the team above their own. And really the leaders, it's all about individual coaching and development. The leader's job is to find ways to develop, elevate, and inspire people. Typically companies or organizations that have servant leaders typically have very strong company values and ideals. Definitely the leader is leading by example in these organizations, putting, money where their mouth is. And typically because of that, there's a very positive organizational culture and a high morale. People tend to go above and beyond when they believe in what they're doing. But the cons is that it might not be agile, again, in a super fast-paced environment where there's tight deadlines or high stress situations. But it really is sort of a newer style that has been a lot in recent publications. So next. So the first question that we want to ask is, what kind of leadership style do you think that you work best under, so that you would like a leader of a group or your manager to have? And we've given you a couple of choices there. So I'll give it just a few seconds to let everyone vote. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. Knowing what you need is also part of knowing yourself. This is also a very important conversation when you have a new leader or a new manager, having open conversations of what you need from them in order for you to do the best job. So I love what we're seeing. It's kind of what I expected. All of that between servant leadership, democratic leadership involves us having a voice somewhat and a say in what is going on in an organization. And again, having somebody who can really be a visionary and set that vision for us is important. And again, like I said, for the right people, that hands-off approach can be very much what some people need, because they know what they're doing, they know what their job is, and they don't want to have 12,000 check-ins with a boss. So next. So this question is slightly different. So this question is, what leadership style do you think you would use most as a leader if you were, whether it's in charge of a project, in charge of people, volunteering? What one do you think you would gravitate most towards as a leader yourself? Not really surprising to see the same kind of answers that we see here that we did for the last one of what you like. And again, sometimes what you need is not your natural style of what you would do. There's no way of knowing if everyone who chose the one before chose the same one here. Seems like Democratic's a little higher here, that we'd like to think we'd be, consultative, gather a lot of people's opinions, and then make a choice. So keep that in mind as we're going through the next several slides. So go ahead and hit next for me, Anna. So as I mentioned, there is no one size fits all. There is no right or wrong leadership form. And as we often see, sometimes different things need different approaches. So this is more commonly now known as situational leadership. So some people consider it a different style, some don't, but really it means with how you lead changes on the situation and the people involved. And so as I mentioned on the previous slide, whether you're a growth organization or a mature organization can make a difference. The type of work that you're doing, is it routine work, creative work? And obviously the level of experience, both of the leaders as well as the team members, is very important. And personality of the leader plays a really big role as well. Next, please. So some helpful assessments, and these are just a sampling, and I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit more in detail. So there's one called Strength Finders, also known as Clifton Strengths. There's the DISC profile, an Insight Discovery profile, and like I mentioned, there's a plethora of other leadership quizzes and things that you can take, but the three that are mentioned are really structured, and I'm going to talk about the kind of information that you get from them. So next. So Strength Finders is first, and the whole idea of this book and this series is first, know your strengths, and it's based on the psychology of Don Clifton, who is often called the kind of father of strength psychology. And what it really comes down to is you take a very short quiz. It's about like 30 to 35 questions. And at the end of that, you get a profile that tells you anywhere from your top 5 to your top 10 strengths. So there are some free versions, and then there's versions that you pay to do the assessment. When you pay, you get the 10. And really what this is based on is that they give you your strengths, but really what they say is that a strength is actually defined as something that is both a natural talent that you have, as well as something that you have a passion for. And this is a really important distinction, because just because you're good at something doesn't make it a strength. If it's not something that you're passionate about, if it drains you to do it, even though you're good at it and you can do it, then that's not a strength. A strength should be something that empowers you and lifts you up and fills your cup. And the idea of Strength Finders is that while yes, it is important to acknowledge our area of growth, that like our weaknesses, you are actually going to grow more in your areas where you already have strength. So it's much easier to get a higher level of improvement in something that you're already good at, and that's where you should dive in and sort of try to tailor your career or your job responsibilities around those strengths, because that will lead to higher job satisfaction and less burnout if you're able to do that. So next. So overall, there are 4 domains of strength. So there's executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Overall, there are 34 different strengths that the book goes over. And again, none of these are good, none of these are bad. They are all just what they are. So you can see there that people who are dominant, so if they have more strengths that fall into the executing category, these are people who are known for accomplishing things, getting it done. It's all about action, making it happen. These are the people who can turn a vision into practical steps. Those who are dominant in influencing do just that. They influence others to reach the goal. So they're really good at gaining momentum, getting people on board. They like to, they're comfortable with taking charge. They help speak up and give a voice either to a project or to a person. If you have more strengths in the relationship building, you're typically concerned and interested with the ways that people are affected. So these are people who are typically very awesome in the emotional intelligence department, and that domain is all about people skills. These are people who typically build rapport very easily and help others be seen, heard, and appreciated. And then the final one is strategic thinking. So these are the people who make things happen. These are the people who can create those visions. It's all about critical thinking, really able to absorb and analyze information very well. So next. And so then what the book does is it talks about your strengths, and your profile does is it talks about your strengths, but then it also talks about how strengths work as a team. And so because people are not well-rounded, teams should be. So if you ever have the opportunity to lead a team, it's one of those things that if you do this, if this is something that your work does, I have done this officially through work before, and it's very helpful to hear what other people think their strengths are and talk about them, because it can really help teams work much more efficiently together. Because I know if I hate doing something, but my teammate loves doing it, then it makes more sense to have her do that and I take on something else. Then we're both fulfilled, we're less burdened, and we're ultimately going to get more done. And so again, very quickly, executing people are dominant. They know how to make things happen. You're influencing people. They're taking charge. They're making sure the team is heard. Your strategic thinking. These are people helping consider, what could be done, absorbing that information, and forming better decisions. And the relationship building people on the team are helping to build those relationships. It can really be the glue that holds a team together and make the team greater than the sum of their parts. So again, all of these are important skills to have. Right. Next, Anna. And so the next profile I'm going to talk about is something known as the DISC profile. Very similar. It really is a behavioral assessment tool. It is started in 1928, and it's based on behavioral theory from a psychologist, William Moulton Marston. And it's got 4 domains. So D for dominance, I for influence, S for stability, and C for compliant. And so really what you can see here in the middle is it's really talks about the question. So how do you handle problems and challenges? How do you influence or interact with others? How you handle a steady pace and react to change, and how you respond to rules and procedures set by others. And so this profile tells you what you are high in, but it also tells you what you're low in. And so looking at the opposite, so the things you are lower in could potentially be weakness areas, but not necessarily. It just helps put together a profile of who you are. So next one. And so again, same thing, it kind of tells you your value to the team. So what it does is it takes your unique score across all 4 of those areas and essentially puts you into one of 8 behavioral styles. And it gives you information on both your natural style and your adapted style. And what they mean by that is your adapted style is how you act under stress. And that can be a very important point to learn, because oftentimes that's where our weaknesses are. When we're in a high stress situation, how do we react? How do we come across? And it really helps you understand others' motivating factors and how better to communicate with others. So you can see here across the platform that if you are high D and high C together, you're going to be somewhere probably in that top half. These are typically task-oriented people. If you're more D and I, those are typically more extroverted people. I to S are typically known as being people-oriented, and then S to C are typically your more introverted people. But between that, you can see sort of different behavioral styles that are given to each of them. So next. So last is the insights discovery profile. It almost looks identical to DISC, but there are some differences. So again, this was developed by Carl Jung, someone that we are all familiar with in the genetic counseling world. And it really gives you an assessment, and it gives you your color energies. So as one of my very close friends and colleagues, Heather Meixel, always says, is you are the rainbow. We are all 4 colors. This really just tells you what you lead with. And each color represents certain personality preferences and associated behaviors. So you have your fiery red people, your sunshine yellow, your earth green, and your cool blue. And this really is heavily leaned towards communication. So next, please, Anna. And it can really help you figure out how the different energies like to be communicated with. So these are sort of the taglines for each of the colors. So people who lead with blue are your detail people. So if you you're talking to them, you need all of those details. You need your who, your what, your when, your why, your how. You need your data to back it up. Red people are the opposite. It is be brief, be bright, be gone. These are your bullet point people. They are never going to read a paragraph email. They want things bullet pointed, get right to the point and get out. Yellow people want to be involved. They want to be part of the story. It's very important to make sure that you're engaging with them if you're communicating with them. They don't do great sitting through a really long didactic lecture and not have the opportunity to be involved. And people who lead with green, show me you care. So these are the people that are great with like patient cases. They typically can be really impacted by hearing patient cases. They want to know that you care. These are the people that like to hear a company's values and will choose to buy products and support companies based on their mission and what they do. They want to know that you care. So next. And again, putting it all together, very similar to disc, you get your color energies, but then you were also given this personality type. And you'll notice these are very, very similar to disc as well. And what they call it is they give you your conscious persona and your less conscious persona. So kind of your less conscious is more of your natural style, and your conscious persona is sort of what you turn on and you purposely push up when you are in a work setting. So again, it can be very helpful to know this information. And so next slide. So to kind of wrap it all up, the point of this section is to say that there are many tools and assessments that you can use to better understand yourself and your preferences. And this is information that should absolutely be shared with your managers and your team. It has really helped me to be able to have direct conversations with my managers to say, I know that this is what I need. I perform best when these needs of mine are met. It's very helpful in team dynamics to understand that we all have different communication preferences. So while I'm sitting over here wondering why in the world they are asking all these questions, I can now understand, oh, they lead with blue. They need all of these answers. I don't. And so it helps me potentially be less resentful, or it helps meetings run more efficient because you really understand that we all need different things. And again, it's been super helpful. I've done all three of these in my professional careers in different jobs. I really highly recommend them as workshops or a book club for organizations. All of these have a free version. You obviously don't get as much, but there's also a paid version with Strength Finders. You buy the book and you get the code, or you can just go online and buy the assessment without the book. And then DISC and Insights, they do have free versions. I've always done these offered through an HR organization where the company has chosen to do this, and every new employee gets their profile and it's talked about as part of their onboarding and professional development. And again, personalities and strengths don't typically change. We typically become more of who we are, but leadership styles can change. And so don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you and what is most natural for you, and you will be very successful. And I'm going to turn it back over to Sara.
Thank you so much, Julie. I always like listening to Julie talk about these personal assessments because, you know, I think it's really nice, especially when you are taking an hour out of your day to come hang out with us and listen to this webinar today, to really be able to take some actionable items of, hey, here's something that I can do to get to know myself a little bit better, to potentially put me in a better place in my leadership journey. So courtesy of the Leadership and Management SIG, we are actually going to be raffling off 10 copies of the Strength Finder book. So like Julie mentioned, it comes with the code in the back for your full assessment. And the book goes through, you know, the different strengths, so you can learn a little bit more about your profile. So everybody who is here today who attended this webinar live will automatically be entered into this raffle, and you'll be hearing from us if you're one of the 10 individuals that are selected. And definitely keep an eye out for a Strength Finder workshop in 2023. I'll be talking a little bit about what the Leadership and Management SIG has planned for the rest of the year and next year. But we always are welcoming to new members. And so if it's something that you're like, oh, this is awesome, and I think this would be really helpful, come join us, come become a member of the SIG, and hopefully we will have a workshop hosted by Julie next year. Next slide. So to transition into the next part of our leadership webinar today, I was going through a lot of the responses from the NSGC community when it came to what's good advice that you would give to someone who was looking to improve their leadership skills. And one word appeared many, many, many times. And if you click, it should pop up. And that's mentorship, is to find a mentor and to hopefully learn from somebody that you look up to as a leader. So with that, Anna and Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you all to talk with everybody a little bit about mentorship.
Perfect.
Thank you, Sara. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Carrie Lahner. I'm a licensed and certified genetic counselor at the Mayo Clinic. I spend half of my time working in the whole exome sequencing laboratory and the other half of my time working with our Mayo Clinic Laboratories sales and marketing division. I'm a 2004 graduate of the University of Minnesota and have spent my 18 years as a genetic counselor in a wide variety of roles, whether it be clinical, education, or research. When Sarah asked, when did you feel like a leader? My initial response was, I don't know if I am yet. Am I? As she mentioned, it's not something that you really wake up one day and all of a sudden feel like, yeah, I've accomplished this. I'm a leader. But I think I paralleled my experience with regard to that to some of my early clinical experience when I was in clinic, and all of a sudden you just develop some more of a confidence in driving some of those conversations forward, and really feeling like it wasn't something I had to have a strict outline for or anticipate how the entire conversation was going to go. But when colleagues started coming to me asking for more advice and recommendations and just shared experiences, I suppose that's about the time that it started to feel like more of an ability to offer in that regard, offer advice and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Anna?
And I'm Anna Essendrup. I am a genetic counselor here at Mayo Clinic as well. I primarily focus my time in the cytogenetics area of our laboratory. I have been here for about 8 years. And before that, I did have some brief time in the clinic. And my answer to the when did you start feeling like a leader is similar with everyone else. I think kind of the visual that I thought of was a bit of a roller coaster in that there's highs and lows. Some days I feel like I am leading and doing a great job, and there's other days where I feel like I am definitely a follower and don't have a handle on things. So definitely there is different points where kind of that leadership comes in, and also often is very driven by things that I'm passionate about that others can see, and then start to come to me with questions about that as well. So we are speaking a little bit today, Carrie and I, about a pilot that we of a mentorship relationship that we had together for our work unit. So to give a little bit of background, our work unit of genetic counselors had seen a recurrent theme through both staff satisfaction surveys and other feedback mechanisms that our work unit wanted more professional development opportunities. And so our management group came to us asking if we would pilot a mentorship and then share that experience back with the group, just to determine how that fits into professional development, kind of allow people a window into one experience that then maybe others could benefit from or see themselves in going forward. And there are a lot of different ways to accomplish professional development, of course, and mentorship is just one of those tools. So before we jump into things further, just a little bit of background on where the word mentorship comes from. So the origin is in Homer's The Odyssey, which was believed to have been written in about 800 BCE. There is a character, Odysseus of Ithaca, who leaves to fight in the Trojan War, and he entrusts the care of his son to Telemachus. To an older and wiser friend named Mentor, who's another character in that story. And Telemachus and Mentor develop a strong relationship built on Mentor's guidance and support. So since that time, Mentor in the English language has evolved to become synonymous with a teacher, a counselor, coach, facilitator, motivator, and friend. So some of the goals Carrie and I worked on as we kind of began this pilot process and in documenting our journey were, from the mentee perspective, was thinking about interacting with genetic counselors outside of my immediate work unit as a mentee. So there are a number of genetic counselors, wonderful genetic counselors that I work with every day, but reaching out outside of that to kind of strengthen a new relationship. And then developing skills, furthering professional growth, including considering decision-making skills based on both my and Carrie's perspective. And then also improving advocacy skills for myself and for my colleagues as we work together towards professional growth. Improving my self-reflective skills, and then also really practicing vulnerability with another colleague. And then Carrie?
And I was so grateful that our GC supervisors of our genetic counselor work unit were supportive of this initiative and recognized it as an opportunity. While I may be older than Anna, I definitely don't consider myself to be wiser, but we were able to pilot this kind of conversation and outline goals for either of us. So engaging in this type of relationship, could otherwise feel to a mentor, what's in it for me, and feel maybe a little bit draining. And so it was important that I think as a mentor that I recognized some things that were of value to me through engaging in this relationship as well. Again, laboratory setting now, I don't have as much of a ability to practice some of my general counseling skills, and wanted to really work on improving the active listening and our counseling skills from our training to assist Anna in identifying any barriers to achieving some of her professional goals, and sharing experience with the goals of providing insight to encourage abilities and overcome perceived or real obstacles. One of my other tasks as a mentor was to really determine and develop this framework of activities, some cadence of discussion, self-reflection tasks, and tools that would help a mentee move further toward professional goals, and then subsequently improve my self-reflective skills too, to guide my professional growth in this regard. So when we were setting out to develop this pilot and this framework, some of the questions that we asked ourselves too were, who were the appropriate candidates to consider engaging in this type of activity? How do you know when you're ready to be a mentor or when you're ready to be a mentee? And were there any specific criteria we could outline to provide value back to our work unit? We wanted to understand how long a formal mentor and mentee relationship would last, and if there were any nuggets of information that we could take back to our group to help understand how do you match a mentor and a mentee and set them up for success. Were there any innate characteristics or measurable details that we could identify to ensure a good pairing? Next. With that being said, we're on to another Slido here, and just reflecting on our experience of mentorship, I'm certain we've all had individuals in our professional careers that we look back on as mentors. Let's just share a few words or phrases that remind you of a past mentor. Honest, listener, experience. Supportive, coach. Listening, caring, supportive. Encouraging, reflective, listener, available. Challenging, a good one too, to recognize it's not just always the support, but being able to reflect back some experiences and challenge. Available, reliable. That's great. Thank you all for sharing. That was our reflection as well. When we looked back on our pilot experience and our personalities, we're trying to understand, we felt like we had a successful mentor-mentee relationship, and how did we do that? A couple of pillars that you can look at here, a foundation is really set in the building of the trust, but listening, encouraging, reliable, and to also ensure that we're having fun with it. Anna and I really felt like this experience was successful for us, but if it was because of our personalities or our backgrounds or just our personal desire and our engagement to build our strength in this type of relationship is really, really hard to measure and really hard to quantify at this part. When we looked back to, we also asked this question, did our background and our personalities lead to this success? Or did our commitment to the mentorship reveal more similarities, which also led to this success? As kind of a chicken or an egg question. But overarchingly, with the characteristics that we just mentioned here in the Slido poll, and just a general foundation of that building trust and some other characteristics, a mentorship can be very, very valuable and very, very successul.
So for some of the framework of kind of how we documented things as we went through this pilot, we elected to meet 1 hour every other week to focus on professional development topics. And then we also included some ad hoc meetings as well throughout that 6-month period. Our mentorship relationship has continued past that, but in somewhat of a less formal capacity. Some of the key components were the mentee is really in charge of setting the goals and responsible for driving content, bringing professional issues, concerns, topics to the pair. And then the mentor acting as a trusted advisor above all else, really having an open confirmation, this being a safe space. If necessary, a mentor agreement could definitely be used as well, particularly for pairings that may not know each other as well off the bat. To kind of establish that safe space. Along those lines, encouraging transparency and vulnerability, minimizing distractions within that time, that we were really there for each other and not focusing on the emails coming in or other things. Being committed, but also being willing to and open to rescheduling. You know, life happens, things come up. Sometimes it's just really not a great time to sit down and have that open conversation. So being really honest about that is key. And then keeping notes from conversations really secure and private is important as a part of that trust building. And then some of the topics kind of naturally our flow that we observed were when we started just doing some getting to know you questions, sometimes with formal questions, sometimes things just come up, which is great. What are some of the challenges you've had at work from both sides, the mentor and the mentee? What are some of your top priorities outside of work? And that can really help to give context to the further conversations you have later. Goals in that relationship. And then kind of as we dove deeper, the kind of session flow typically ended up being what's happening in life, what's happening in work, is that positive or negative? Kind of prioritizing those things by urgency and what's going on. Why do those things bring you joy? Or if they don't, why are they, you know, what maybe could be changed? What are things you have to accept? And then also allowing for some validation of not everything is always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And then kind of following up from last time, making sure that the mentee is kind of keeping accountable to what they owe to the relationship in driving things and making that professional development happen for themselves. And then sometimes homework is important, both formally or informally, doing some intentional reflection on what brings you joy. Again, thinking about those strengths. Where are your strengths? Where do they lie? What career then, or what areas of a career might allow you to use your strengths more often. And then also talking with friends and family or other trusted individuals about some of the items that come up in those conversations for your own personal growth and development as a mentee. So in measuring success, some of the things that we thought about were, was the relationship successful and comfortable? Was there, again, that innate chemistry? Are there similarities that you identified? Strengths between the two of you? Professional impact should be measured really by self-reflection or qualitatively. Some mentor-mentee relationships may have a specific goal, but that's not every relationship. And so having concrete or tangible steps may not be a part of every successful relationship. And then a mentor can also really measure evolution in the conversation and momentum of progress. If things seem stuck, maybe the goals or kind of direction needs to pivot. And it's important to kind of be open to considering where you're going may change as your relationship develops. So some of the outcomes then that I noted in our pilot were recognition and further development of a trusted professional relationship outside of my immediate work unit, improving clarity on the framework for professional decision making, thinking about how do I approach opportunities as they come up for me in the future and consider whether that's really going to meet my career goals or if maybe it's something I should consider saying no to, considering the factors on how I weigh those items, strengthening then those professional goals going forward, and then designing additional tools to kind of keep the work that we have done going and fresh as opportunities come up in the future.
In terms of outcomes for myself, it was great to push myself in this other area. Again, like I mentioned, I don't necessarily feel like a leader in certain regards. And so to be able to kind of push myself in another element of practice and feel successful because of this relationship that Anna and I had developed, and to see various opportunities for growth in both of our work-life balance was really fulfilling. And it really just helped to solidify for me, and recognize that I have had an 18-year career. I do have experiences to impart on how I've made decisions in the past or how I've worked through certain work challenges. And so really helped to recognize the need to trust myself and value some of those individual experiences and be confident in reflecting that, even when I didn't feel like an expert at times. In terms of our work unit, again, because this was a pilot, we took back the information to our supervisor team, and we're very encouraged that they elected to support this in two different regards. One in a type of continuous employee development model like Anna and I had piloted, but also recognizing the need for some new employee mentorship as it comes to laboratory genetic counselors being hired to a Mayo Clinic culture, that there was a need to just orient and onboard in a mentor type fashion. So exciting to see both of those be supported moving forward. And from our work unit, we've had 3 additional pairs of individuals who have been identified to continue to document and share their best practices within the work unit so that we can continue to roll this out among other genetic counselors at Mayo Clinic. So in terms of next steps, if you are thinking about the possibility, like Sara had mentioned earlier, many individuals have identified mentorship as an opportunity for continuing to drive forward their professional growth. And so thinking about whether or not you are in a position to be a mentee or a mentor, here are some helpful questions that might help to orient you in that regard. Is there a specific goal in mind that you're looking to attain? This could be something that's a very discrete project or more general goal related to your career development, or have you identified somebody in the field that you really want to work with or learn from? Both of those are appropriate situations which might help you to recognize that, mentorship might be in your future as a mentee. When it comes to a mentor, some things to consider are whether or not you consider this activity valuable and in alignment with your ongoing professional goals, and also just to ensure that you are at a space in your career that you have enough emotional energy available to commit to this type of activity. Next. And so hopefully at the end of this, if you each have just a few minutes or, later on this evening when you're reflecting and being intentional about this topic that you've spent an hour with us on today, thinking about where could you continue to push yourself to grow professionally? Is there anything in particular that you want to work on? Or subsequently, do you feel like you have unique experiences or value that you could add to contribute to another's success? Again, either of those questions will help you to understand whether or not mentorship is a good fit for you moving forward.
Thank you, Anna and Carrie, so much. Since we're at the top of the hour, I'm going to try to speed talk through some of the other resources that we have. So I'm so happy that we had this full hour to share these, Julie's tools and Anna and Carrie's experience with this pilot. And thank you to Carrie. She had put something in the Q&A. The NSGC Connect is a mentorship tool. So if you don't have maybe a big group of GCs you work with, somebody in your work unit, that can be an awesome resource for mentors or mentees. So thank you, Carrie, for the reminder. Next slide. So I just wanted to share a few resources that are out there for all of you as NSGC members. Anna, if you could just click and all my little pictures will come up. So in today's webinar, Julie, of course, dove into To Know Thyself is the beginning of all wisdom to really help with that leadership journey. Anna and Carrie were able to share mentorship as a resource for building leadership skills. And then if you keep clicking Anna, it's also really important to make sure you let other people know that you're looking to build leadership skills. So I know I've had experiences at work, and this is something that was returned in the survey as well. If you let your, teammates know or let people know, hey, I'm looking to, lead a project, or I'd love to take that on. That's a great way to get some of that experience. A lot of our SIG members that weighed in on leadership advice just said at some point, you've got to jump in. Like Julie says, growth is going to be a little bit uncomfortable at times, but jumping in really allows you to get that experience, whether it goes the way you think or a little bit differently. And last but not least, so important to volunteer. Next slide. There are some fantastic volunteer opportunities through each individual SIG. So thank you to the cardio SIG, the prenatal SIG, the inpatient SIG. They actually sent us some openings they have for co-chairs and committee members. If you are a SIG member or aware of other resources, please feel free to throw that in the chat. And I would really encourage everyone, hey, check out the SIG, see what positions are open. I think 2 emails have gone out just in the last week about the NSGC call for volunteers. I counted, and I think there's over 30 plus types of different volunteer opportunities, and you can indicate on the application if you're interested in a leadership position. So great way to get more involved. Next slide. This was a tool, if anybody is looking kind of along the lines of what Julie talked about today, that was shared, is to knowing your core values. So if you're looking for something really speedy, just if you're feeling inspired after today, from Taproot, you can live your core values to, find what core values resonate with you. Next slide. This was a fantastic tip. If you're just looking for this stuff to be a little closer to the front of your brain, the Harvard Business Review has a management tip of the day and a monthly leadership newsletter. So this is an example of just like a little tip, like how to nail your next group presentation. And it's just that long. So if you're looking for something in your inbox, that's another great tool to utilize. Next slide. So last few slides. the Leadership and Management SIG. If you really enjoyed this presentation today, if you're looking to build your leadership skills, highly encourage you pay the $20 to join the Leadership and Management SIG. So we have a few main offerings. Our first main offering are peer supervision groups. You can see the testimonials. People say this is an extremely beneficial way for them to discuss anonymous and de-identified leadership and management related issues and challenges. We put you in small groups, and then kind of let you run free in terms of organizing that, but really, really useful. Again, if you're a solo GC or just looking for GCs to connect with who maybe are a little further on their leadership journey. Next slide. We also have an Ask Me Anything. So if you love the discussion forum or the SIG posts, we have 1 week where we highlight an individual SIG member and their leadership journey, and people can chime in and ask them questions, which they'll answer for the whole SIG to see. So really awesome experience. And next one's actually scheduled for next month. And lastly, we have our LM chats, or our formerly known as forum discussions. They're open and confidential discussion-based meetings, very free-flowing, talking about a certain topic or issue. Our next meeting is scheduled for November, and it's going to focus on engaging with social media, very big in our community, that people turn to social media to voice different things and show themselves as a leader. So we want to expand on that a little bit more. Next slide. So we hope that today's webinar has given you some really good tools that you can take away, start putting into practice, and to really show you that it is just taking one step at a time, even if it means you volunteer to lead a project, even if it's not work, even if it's within your own community, that it really is something that each and every one of us can attain. Next slide. This concludes our webinar for today. The NSGC webinar subcommittee would like to announce that there is a new August episode on the podcast series, which is testing first and counseling after, population genomic screening and genetic counseling. So go check that out on the NSG website or Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you're looking for something to listen while you drive. On behalf of the NSGC webinar subcommittee, I really just want to thank everybody that was a co-speaker today. Carrie, Anna, and Julie, wonderful to work with all three of you. And thank you to the Leadership and Management SIG for just their ongoing support in this. Unfortunately, I don't know if we have time for questions, as we are a little over. I think I'm okay with staying on. So if anyone has questions that they want to pop, into the chat, then that's wonderful. Anna, I think, do we have a slide with our emails on there as well? The webinar recording will be up on the NSGC website in 48 hours. And once this webinar ends, or actually, I'm going to scratch that. You should be getting an email from the NSGC to take a survey to get your CEUs for today. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But again, we are so grateful that you joined us today. We hope this was helpful, and hope that everybody has a great rest of the week. So if you'd like to stay on and ask any questions, please do so, and we can hang out for a moment. And I can post the title of the podcast that I had mentioned earlier into our chat. So if you do want to check that out, then we can put the name of it here. There we go. Just put it in the chat. Any questions, or we can also end if we're a little over.
It doesn't look like any questions are coming in, Sarah.
All right. Well, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you so much again for everyone that supported us, and for everyone for tuning in. And we will contact our 10 raffle winners shortly. So thanks, everybody.